Hello and welcome to This Week in Civics. My name is Rachel Davison Humphries, and here we are. First full week of a new president. Lots of different things happening in the Senate and Congress and around the country as we look to the future and whatever that brings us. So my name is Rachel Davison Humphries. I'm Director of Outreach at the Bill of Rights Institute. And this week in Civics, I want to talk about the inauguration that happened last week. I want to talk about the impeachment that's probably going to happen in February. That's when they said the proceedings are going to start. And then the role of the president, just generally. So thinking about the inauguration, inaugurations in American history have always been a time, I think, of positive forward looking. There's this idea that every democratic election is a mini revolution to ward off revolutions that are bigger in the future. And so this revolution, this mini revolution, this inauguration came with a lot of tension that I haven't felt in previous periods, but I felt the inauguration ceremony spoke to a real unity of America. And I thought that was really beautiful, especially the poetry. I don't know how many of you had a chance to hear the inaugural poem, but it was by a girl named Amanda Gorman, a young woman named Amanda Gorman, and she spoke beautifully. But what I loved about her poetry was how forward thinking it was. That we are, she had this incredible line. So if we lift our gazes not to what stands between us, but what stands before us, we close the divide because we know to put our future first, we must also put our differences aside. We lay down our arms so we can reach out our arms to one another. We seek harm to none and harmony for all. I just thought if you get a chance to, if you haven't seen her read it, it's a fantastic reading of the poem. But then if you get a chance to look at the transcript and really think about what it means to be American for you today, and do that with your students. I always love this time of year between the end of January and February and President's Day, like coming back off the holidays and going into President's Day, and then kind of from here until spring break is this. I always felt it was my most productive time in the classroom because we had this big stretch of time to be together and to create community and really think about ideas. Where I lived, it was always kind of colder, so people were, there weren't as many sports and all those sorts of things. And so, what does it mean to be American to you? What does it mean? What does this poem mean to you? Is there other American poetry that you love to work with students? I'd love to hear that. Put it in the comments. Then the other thing that's happening this week is the cabinet. That's a big deal. If you're interested in how the cabinet is verified, you can look on the National Constitution Center has a fantastic resource. Ballotpedia has a fantastic resource on how to do that. BRI's resources actually are a little limited on cabinet appointments, but we have a ton of stuff on the role of the president and the Constitution. And that's what I really want to talk about as we look towards the future and think about these impeachment proceedings, and having a transition of presidential power peacefully, thankfully. I think that thinking about what our president's role is, this is a really good time to do that. And BRI has a whole resource called Presidents and the Constitution, which can help you do that. We have playlists on presidential power on our new website. But as I was thinking about this and how I would introduce this to my students, I actually went back to our very first president's farewell address. So if you've ever read George Washington's farewell address, it was in 1796 as he was ending his term. It's really prescient. It really has, it's one of those texts that speaks to us today as if it weren't 215 years ago, 225 years ago. 96 is not that far back, but maybe it is. But I wanted to read a short excerpt to you from this because I think it speaks so clearly to what's happening right now. So this is Washington's farewell address, 1796. In contemplating the causes which may disturb our union, it occurs as matter of serious concern that any ground should be furnished for characterizing parties by geographical discriminations, Northern and Southern, Atlantic and Western, I'm going to put this in here, city versus rural. Whence designating men may endeavor to excite a belief that there's a real difference of local interests and views. One of the expedients of party to acquire influence within particular districts is to misrepresent the opinions and aims of other districts. How are we talking about ourselves? How are we talking about others today? How do we think about ourselves versus the other? And I think, again, Washington seeing this in 1796. And then later on, he says, toward the preservation of your government, towards the preservation of your government and the permanency of your present happy state, it is requisite not only that you steadily discountenance irregular oppositions to the acknowledged authority, but also that you resist with care the spirit of innovation upon its principles, however specious the pretexts. So what he's saying there is, let's be careful about how quickly we change what we do as Americans in our civic institutions. And it goes on. It's really a fantastic document. If you haven't ever read it, I highly recommend it, Washington's Farewell Address, because it gets us, again, at the very beginning, we were thinking about the things that could disrupt this democratic experiment. And I'm thinking about those things again today as we start the Biden presidency, as we look to the future post-pandemic and what our society looks like at the end. What does it mean to be American? What is the role of the president? Are all important questions to ask. Well, thanks for joining me for This Week in Civics. I'm here every week, Monday mornings on YouTube and Facebook Live. So I'd love to see you there. I'd love to hear what you want to talk about. So hit me up in the comments or chats. I will go through and make sure that I respond to all your inquiries. And I want to know what you want to talk about. What are you working on with your students in civics this week? And maybe we'll touch on it next week. Thank you so much.